Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really look forward to this interview, and I'm sure a lot of new teachers will definitely benefit from what you have to offer. So, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited.
Great. I'll jump into the first question. What were your fears or challenges going into teaching in your first couple years, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah. For my first couple years as a teacher, my biggest fear was definitely that admin would just wake up one day and just discover that I was an imposter and had no idea what I was doing. um, I come from, as a student, I learned French through the Core French program in Ontario. So I never, as a student, had any experience with French immersion or how it was structured. And my entire experience for Teachers College was for intermediate, senior, high school French and geography. So when I accepted an elementary French immersion position, I was very, very stressed because I had no clue how to teach reading or math or how to structure my day or do anything. It was really overwhelming. um, and I found that the way I overcame that stress is I really relied on my network of teachers and staff at my school. So I went to other teachers and asked them for advice and resources to see if I could look over their schedule and their long range plans to make sure that I was kind of on the right track. And I also had a very, very difficult class with a lot of behaviors. So I went to my vice principal and I asked her to come in and watch me teach. So she came in, looked over everything, and then we had a couple meetings where she gave me lots of tips for classroom management. So I found that I had, even though I was very stressed and feel like I had no clue what I was doing over the first year, I had a lot of growth because I think I took the initiative to go and talk to people more experienced and to really let them help me.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. I know I personally resonated with what you had mentioned. I also grew up in the core system and will be then teaching in
Oh,
French immersion. So there is definitely those feelings of, well,
yep.
like, I've never experienced this. I don't know how it works. I'm not sure if my level of language compares and stuff like that. So I know there are probably other new teachers in the same boat. So thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that experience.
That's amazing. I barely ever find anyone else who did that.
Oh, yeah, I don't know what drove me to it, but I knew like I want to do French immersion. I'm gonna give it a go.
Yeah.
Awesome. My next question for you is what is your strategy for a successful year of teaching in French immersion?
Yes. So my biggest strategy, which I feel like lots of people say all the time, is work smarter, not harder. Because I know that I am a perfectionist and I have a tendency to really like dig my heels in and try and make the most beautiful, wonderful lesson with the perfect Google slides and most amazing summative task. And it's just not sustainable. I know I really burnt myself out a lot the last couple of years, and it still does happen occasionally. But I've gotten a lot better at trying to prioritize what's really, really important, and also just be really careful with how I spend my time. So, for example, I would always say, I'm not going to spend 2 hours making an activity that's only going to be used for 20 minutes. It's just not a good use of my time. I'm not going to cut and laminate any games or stuff like that if I'm not going to use it at least 10 times with my class, because otherwise I'm just going to get tired and burn out. It doesn't need to look perfect.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much.
No problem.
I'm sure most teachers fall somewhere in the type A personality, have a little bit of
Yeah.
perfectionism in them. So very, very useful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Can you share with us three tips that would help reduce stress or overwhelm when planning for or during the year?
Yeah. So things that I would work on in August, and the first one maybe seems a little bit odd, but would be to come up with a system for how you want to handle all of your paperwork. Um, because once school starts, if you don't have a plan for where you are going to put the 800 pieces of paper that are thrown at you during the day, it's going to become this really big, scary pile, and things are going to get lost, and you're going to get worried because you can't find stuff. And then you're never going to mark anything, and you're just going to throw it in the recycling bin. and then it's all just gonna compound and become really stressful. So I would immediately think about, when students are done their work, where do you want them to put their papers? Are they putting their notebooks, or do you have a turn it in bin? Or are you collecting them and putting them in a file? I would think about when kids bring field trip forms. Do you have class lists printed off to check off who's already done it? Where are you going to put all of those, and where are you going to put all the money? I personally, in my classroom, I have two of those really big file boxes. And one of them is for student information. So I put a beginning of the year survey that parents fill out in there, any of our benchmarking papers in there, a writing sample for English and French, and any other important paperwork and stuff that really comes up. And it's nice because then if I ever have a parent meeting, I know I can just open that file folder, pull out that kid's folder, and then I have everything that I need. And then those really important things aren't going to get lost in your messy desk.
Yeah.
And I also always have a monthly copies bin. So I have a file that are numbered from 1 to 31. And then as I do my photocopying, and if I'm ever organized enough to do it ahead of time, I just put it in the number for the day of the month that I'm going to use it. And then I always have it there. And I find that having those two bins, as well as a couple other systems and plans in place, really make my desk less stressful, and then I'm not overwhelmed with losing things all the time. So that would be my first one. Just figure out what to do with all your paperwork. And if I'm rambling, just tell me because I talk.
Gosh, no, that was fantastic and so concrete and practical.
Thank you.
Use. Yes, fantastic.
The next thing that I would think about would be to make a list of all of the routines and procedures that you want to teach over the first week or two. So I know in my freebie that I submitted for the conference, there is a list that you can use as an example or a starting point, or everyone can always make their own. But you really want to spend a lot of the first day, but mostly the first week of school, explicitly teaching every single possible thing that your students should ever need to know for touching any resources in the classroom, for what they need to do, for everything from how do you want them to hang their backpack? What are they allowed to do when they're walking in the hallway? All of how do you want them to sharpen their pencils? When can they sharpen their pencils? Like, it's all of these little annoying things that you don't really realize until you're there the first day of school. And then a kid raises their hand and say, but, and then you're like, oh crap, I don't know what I want you to do for that. So really looking through your day and thinking about every tiny little interaction and explicitly what you want your kids to know. Because if you really hammered that in for September, the rest of your year is going to be so much easier.
Amazing.
They know exactly what to do, and they won't poke you and bug you as much.
Fantastic. I love it.
The next one. And then my third tip for just kind of being less stressed as a whole is more for once the school year's already started, but you can kind of do it a bit now, is to batch all of your lesson planning. So when I am planning, I find that as soon as I get to doing everything day to day, so I'm like, oh, I just need to sort out Monday. And then when Monday's on, oh, I just need to sort out Tuesday. And you're going one day at a time, things get really overwhelming and stressful, and you're not really in a good groove. And you feel like your units are kind of a mess. So what I try and do is I pick a day of the week. So for example, Monday, I plan my French lessons for a week or two. And then I find that there's a lot better flow from day to day. I do a lot better of building towards our summative tasks and making sure I'm covering everything, rather than when you're just frantically trying to throw stuff together the day up. And then Tuesday, I'll plan my math for a week or two and go through that. And it's really helpful because then I think you're kind of in the math mindset or whatever you're working on, and you can be much more efficient.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, those are fantastic pieces of advice. On the flip side of that, could you share 3 things that new teachers should stop doing right now, or stop doing in their first couple years of teaching, to really set themselves up for success?
Absolutely. The first thing I would say would be to stop staying at school so late, and whenever possible, to never bring work home, which I think is something like our generation of teachers is getting better at. I know my mom was a teacher, and she said that she would put us to bed and then would work on schoolwork until 2 a.m. every night.
goodness.
And it's ridiculous. Like no human can possibly function like that.
Yeah.
So really, when you're at school, work hard and make good use of your time, but don't stay at school until 7 o'clock at night every night because you're going to burn out and it's going to be exhausting. So I know personally for myself, I come to school 1 hour before school. So I get an hour of work done. I kind of like do some mindless marking while I'm eating my lunch, nothing too crazy. I really do work during my planning instead of just chatting the whole time. And I stay for 1 hour after school. And all of that time works out to about 3 hours just over of time that I spend just prepping, um, which should be more than enough. Because if you're spending more than 3 hours working to handle 1 6-hour school day, then you're just not being efficient. And you kind of need to look at how you're planning things and what you're doing to make things a lot easier on yourself.
Fantastic.
My second tip for something to stop doing would be to stop marking everything. I know I hate marking. It's my least favorite part of my job. I barely ever mark something. um, but in doing that, I still know where my students are and I still know what their strengths and weaknesses are. So, what I'll do a lot of is if we get a math worksheet, instead of taking it home and spending an hour marking everything and handing it back, and the students never look at anything because they don't care, I'll sort them into got it and doesn't got it piles. Or if I notice that a lot of students have trouble with question 4, I'll put all those papers in a pile. And then the next day, I'll pull those kids over for 2 minutes. We'll work through the problem together, and then they're good to go. It doesn't actually take up that much class time, and it saves me so much time in the evenings. And it's much more meaningful because they're getting to actually sort through problems with you. So yeah, really looking at what do you need to mark. So summative assessments, yes. Tests, yes. Some stuff in between so they kind of know how it works, yes. But when at all possible, I do all my feedback in small groups, and that really helps a lot.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. And the last thing to stop doing, which I think sometimes I'm bad for it too, is to not spend all your money and your time on your classroom decor. So I know my first year I had a classroom. I spent the entire last week of August making sure it looked beautiful and perfect. I had kind of an idea what I was going to do for the first week of school. Units planned. I don't know what I'm going to be teaching next week. I have a pretty classroom, but really the students don't care about that much. So I think I do decorate a little bit because it makes me feel like I have my life together a little bit more when I walk into school. And that's important for me to kind of be in a calm space. But really, I just make sure I have a blank bulletin board with a pretty border. I do have some fairy lights around my whiteboard, but other than that, I don't do any decorating. Because I think the most meaningful things that you would decorate your class with would be anchor charts that you make with your students and then putting up student work. And then the students will respond to that and they'll have a little bit more ownership over the classroom too.
Fantastic.
So yeah, don't focus on that, even though it's so cute.
It is.
So
It's
hard.
very tricky. I feel like I fall in the same boat as you.
Yeah.
The decorating is more so for me sometimes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I feel like I'm on top of everything I need to be. It's a welcoming, warm space.
Yes.
But you're right. It is a big hole to kind of fall into sometimes. So
yeah, and it is important to have a warm, cozy, welcoming space. Absolutely. Also just for my mental health as
yeah,
well as the students. But yeah, it's a fine
a balance. Fantastic. Thank you so much. My next question for you is, I know you touched on this a little bit, and that's okay, but what is your morning and after school routine that you have found to really work for you and really set you up for success during the year?
Absolutely. This is something I am actually very intentional about. This year I came back for term 2 after my second maternity leave. And I was really stressed about how I was going to balance having 2 kids and being back at school, knowing I just didn't have as much time available to me to get everything done. So I went through and I made a list of everything I need to accomplish outside of school hours. And I sorted it into morning, planning time, afternoon to make sure it could all get done. So here's my list. I like wrote it out. So in the morning, as soon as I walk in, I put on some music that I like, just to kind of calm myself down and start my day on a positive note. I turn on my twinkly lights and I water my plants, which maybe once again seems silly, but I think it is important to kind of walk in and make yourself feel like calm and put together and just mentally ready for the onslaught of people poking at you all day. Um, then I lay out any bell work. So if it's a worksheet, I put it on their desk so it's ready, or I write it on the board. I change the date, do the schedule card, and then I just look over my plans, which for the most part are usually done, and grab any last minute supplies that I need. And that doing all of that usually takes me about an hour, as well, but you could do it much quicker. And then after school, as soon as the school bell's done, I close the door and I actually just take 10 minutes just to calm down. Um, because I know that I'm an introvert. And after a whole day of people interrupting and just me having to be out there and performing, I really need 10 minutes just to kind of decompress and just not talk to another human. So I'm just quiet. Then I do any of my photocopies because I find at the beginning of the day the photocopier is really jammed, and then I waste time just kind of sitting there. I do a 10-minute quick clean of the classroom, quickly write up my plans, and make sure my desk is clean because then when I come in the next day, I feel together.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I just had to mute myself there. My dog has decided to join and was barking, so
Oh,
just didn't want some extra noise, but thank you. That was very specific, very detailed, and fantastic. So
once again, if I'm talking too much, just like give me a
oh gosh,
signal.
no. This is fantastic. I'm sure so many teachers will learn so much from what you have to offer. So I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah.
My next question for you is, what is one thing that you know now, where you are in your career, that you wish you knew when you were starting off?
Yes, the biggest thing I wish I knew, which I feel they always told me in teachers college, but I didn't really listen to it, was to be very, very strict about your expectations for students speaking French. Right from the very first day of school, even though they've had 2 summers off. Um, I used to be a camp counselor, and something we would always say would be, it's harder to get harder and easier to get easier. So if you have really firm expectations at the beginning of the year, they know that's what they need to do. They will speak French and they'll figure it out. But if your expectations and you are lower and you're pretty loosey goosey and they just need to ask if they want to get a drink or go to the bathroom, they will not speak French the rest of the day. So really, even though it can be frustrating sometimes, just really hold that firmly, and it makes a big difference.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. I feel like probably you as well as a core student. Um,
Yeah.
if the expectations weren't there, you only spoke
Oh,
at
a
least
hundred
right.
percent.
Yeah, it was not that important. Yeah, but thank you so much. That's fantastic. My next question for you is,
Mhm.
what is one thing that new French teachers can do today, to help set them up for teaching in the next year or a couple of years?
Yeah. I would say, if it was especially for this year, and looking at August specifically, I would figure out what your long range plans are for the year. So I know my school board, I'm with the Upper Grand District School Board. We have long range plans made for us. So if anyone wants a copy, they can just send me a message and I'll like download it and send it to you. But looking at what units do you want to teach when, and then while it's summer, you can have nice drink with you, sit outside, and just as you have time, just peruse the internet and find some resources. Make a Google Drive folder for each unit and each subject. And then as you find stuff, like plug it in a folder. Because when it's in the summer, you're not stressed and it's kind of fun. You can be creative. And then when you start the school year, you're going to have all of these folders full of stuff that you can use. So when it's March and you're burnt out and you're tired and you're about to start a unit on Passé Composé, you can open it and be like, oh, thank God, like here's
Yeah.
a good starting part for you to go from. So that would be my main thing. And also, yeah, just participating in conferences and talking to people and just slowly building your skills because it comes.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
No
My
problem.
very last question for you today is, who was or who is your mentor or inspiration?
Nice. I had actually mentioned earlier in the interview accidentally. I don't know why it came up. But my mom was also a teacher. She just retired. She taught for, I think, 36 years. Not French immersion, English, and she was a cert. But she was a really great inspiration, just a model for how passionate teachers can be, and how knowledgeable she could be about curriculum and classroom management. And I really appreciate that after a bad day at school, I always call her and I vent, and then she gives me tips for things that I can do. And I've just been very thankful I have someone who I can bounce his ideas off of. I know my husband is, so he doesn't have to listen to the teacher talk as much.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm hopeful that as I become more experienced and stuff, that I can be that person for someone else and I can answer questions and kind of help them as well.
Great. Awesome. I love to hear stories like that.
Yeah.
It's great. Thank you so much again for joining us and answering these questions. I know so many new French teachers are really going to be thankful to what you have shared for us.
Amazing. And thanks for putting together this conference. And it's a
Of
lot of work and I appreciate it.
of course. Thank you.